Amen. One quick announcement from Reese. He did say if we go past 11 today, however minutes we go past 11, he'll take that off his sermon next week. So we'll get you that time back anyway. He made that promise, so we'll hold him to that. The prodigal son, probably one of the most told stories throughout the Bible. If you ask people different things about the Bible, I guess probably more people know John 3:16 than anything else. But probably shortly thereafter would be the prodigal son. Most people know the story. Young man comes to his father and says, I want what's mine. Lord, Father, I know you've made a plan for me, but I want what's mine. I'm going to do my own thing. Sounds like a typical teenager, right? I'm going to do my own thing. And because I know what I need and you don't. And then we know what happens. He goes off into the city and boy, he has himself a really good time for a while. And then before long he wakes up and he finds himself where he never intended to be. Sleeping and eating with pigs. And if you know anything about the Jewish religion and what the Jews believed about swine, that was about as low as a person could ever be. And then he decides one day, you know what, I'm going to just go back to my dad's house and ask him if I can just be a servant. And then he heads back, I'm sure not knowing what to expect. And then we see the welcoming that his father gave him. But I want to look at this young man for just a few minutes today and kind of see what we can get out of this story. How can we take this story of the prodigal son and make it reality here in 2013? How can we apply it to our lives? How can we grow from this? Well, the first thing I want to look at with this young man is the decree he made. Now, I'm sure he meant well, but what did he do? He stood up and he said, Dad, you know all that you've got planned for me. Obviously, his dad was a very wealthy man. He had made very good plans for his two sons. And we know that he had set aside a certain amount of money, and he probably had an exact plan for what this son needed to do, and it was something to do well. It was something to make this son successful. He had a very big plan for him, but his son came to him and he said, Dad, I know you've got a plan for me. I know you've got all this set up, and I know you have a plan for me to be successful, but Dad, here's the deal. I know more than you do. Dad, I know more than you do. All that money you have planned for me, all that stuff you have set up for me, I want you to give it to me and let me do with it what I want because, Dad, I know more than you. Now, every person in this room, whether you will admit it or not, sometime probably between the age of 14 and 20, has thought that very same thing about your parents. Dad, I know more than you do. And that's what this young man did. He came to his dad and he said, Dad, I know more than you what I need. I know more than you what I want. I want you to give me the money. Let me do my own thing. Now, the sad thing is a lot of times in our lives we do that exact same thing with God. God, whether we want to admit it or not, God has a plan for each and every person that's here today. If you are here and you are breathing this morning and God has an exact plan for your life. He has something He wants you to do. He has some way He wants you to serve Him. But a lot of times we begin to look at God and we say, God, I know just a little bit more than you do. Believe me, God, I understand what you have set aside. And what did God say about this in Proverbs 14:12? In Jeremiah 29:11. He said, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. That's what God said to us. He said, believe me, I have a plan for you. And it's plans to prosper you, not to hurt you. That's the exact same plan this man had for his son. He said, I've got a plan for you. And it's not a plan to hurt you. It's a plan to help you. But this young man said, no, I know what you've got planned, Dad, and that's not what I've got planned. I've got a better idea. And he went to his dad and said, Dad, forget that. I'm making a decree today that I'm not going to follow your plan. I'm going to follow my plan. Now, you may say, well, how'd that work out for him? Not too good. Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Let me tell you, if our will and God's will come head to head and clash, when we choose our way over His, it ain't ever going to work out good. It ain't ever going to come to a positive thing. And that's exactly what this young man did, is he said, you know what, Dad? I know more than you. I'm standing up making that statement. I'm going to do my own thing. And that's exactly what he did. And notice his dad allowed him to do it. And, you know, if we come to God and we say that, God will allow you to, you know, he'll allow you to dig your own hole. And that's exactly what this young man did. He goes out and starts doing his own thing. Now, after his decree, I want to look at his delusion. And you understand what delusion is. That's when you think one thing and you don't even realize what you're doing. This young man, let me tell you what he really thought. And this is something we find a lot in the world today. This young man thought he could have his cake and eat it too. This young man thought, I'll go down here to the city and I'll live it up and I'll do all of that and I'll do all these wrong things, but I'll still be all tight with my dad. And I'll still be his son, and I'll still be right there, and everything will be exactly the same. I can go over here and have all this fun and still have this great relationship with my father. And that is exactly what he tried to do. And in his mind, he thought he could do that. He thought, you know what, I can go down here and live it up and party and do all these fun things and still live here in the city, but still have this great relationship with my father that is over here. And you know what? That did not work out for him. Because let's see what happened. He ended up getting down there and getting so far away from his dad, you see where he ended up. But he thought he could do both. James 3:11 and 12 says, does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries? Either a vine, figs. So no fountain both can yield salt water and fresh. Now if you say, well, what in the world does that have to do with what you just said? See, this young man thought, I can go down and live the life I want to live and still have the life that my dad has for me. And I can do both. You see, that's the problem we have a lot in the world today. Or people think in their minds, I can go out and live however I want to live and do whatever I want to do and still have a great relationship with God. That don't work out too well. Because what we find is when we get out and we begin to live the life that this young man was living and roll around in the things that he was rolling around with, guess what? His dad became very, very distant to him. His dad became very, very estranged to him. He became so far away that the young man, I'm sure he didn't even think of him until he hit rock bottom. He completely forgot about his dad. And a lot of times that's what we find today is people trying to do both, trying to play this juggling act of, you know what, here are the things of the world that are so important, here are the things that are God are so important, and I'm going to try to balance them both. I'm going to try to take this and balance all of these things that I'm not supposed to do and do all these worldly things, but I'm going to try to take the things of God and try to balance them both and do them both at the same time. And it never works out. Because what ends up happening are those things of the world that you allow to take over your life end up pushing God completely out of it. Luke 16:13 says this flat out. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It says no man can serve two masters. For either he hate one and love the other, or else he will hold the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And that's exactly what this young man tried to do. He said, you know what? I'm going to serve my father on this hand and serve myself on this hand. And we find out that did not work out for him. He finds himself dirty, laying down in a pit, sleeping with the pigs, absolutely as low in life as he could get. Now at this time, he had to make a decision. I want you to think about this young man. And some of you have been there in life before. Now, maybe you literally weren't laying down and sleeping with the pigs. Hopefully, none of us have been at that in our life. But you've been in an instance like that where in your life you've been absolutely as low as you can go. And a lot of times, it's because we have led our own self into that. And a lot of times we get to that point in our life and we say, wow, how in the world did I get here? How in the world? Because, understand, when Satan dangles a little carrot in front of you and says, hey, come on, you imagine you're going to take one step. You don't ever imagine you're going to end up all the way over there. Because you've heard that old song that sin will take you further than you ever want to go. And that's exactly what happened to this young man. I promise you, when he left home and he took all of his dad's money and he went to the city, he never imagined he was going to end up somewhere in a pig pen eating husk that the pigs wouldn't even eat. He never imagined that's where he would end up. But lo and behold, he is. Now, the very first thing before he could get some help, he had to realize where he was. He could sit here and make this delusion of himself and say, you know what, my life is just perfectly fine. There's no problem here. I've got it all under control. Guess how much help he's going to get doing that? You know, it's just like if you deal with people who are addicted to drugs or anything like that. What is the very first thing they have to do? They have to admit they have a problem. This man the first thing he had to do is admit, I've got a problem. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. This is not where I intended to be. This is not where my Father intended for me to be. There's something wrong. So he had to get to that point. Now, the next thing he had to do was, and this is important, and this is where a lot of people struggle with this, he had to make a conscious decision to get out of the pig pen. He had to make a decision. He had to get to that point where he said, I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired of putting myself in this situation. I'm getting out of the pig pen. You know, I always wonder what he was thinking when he was laying there. And it said, you know, he thought about his dad. And see, let me tell you, put this in 2013. Here's what a lot of people would do. Hey, God, what's up? Yeah, I'm down here in the pig pen. Why don't you come down here and live with me? All right, bye. No, actually, they wouldn't do that. They'd send him a text. But post him on Facebook or something. I don't know. You know, that's what they would do in today's world. But they would say, you notice he did not send a message to his father and say, Father, why don't you come down here and live in the pig pen with me? But see, a lot of times when we hit rock bottom and we realize there's a problem, that's the first reaction we have is, hey, God, I'm down here. I'm in bad shape. I've got myself in a mess. Why don't you come down here and live with me? Notice he didn't do that. The very first thing he did, he made a conscious decision to get out of the pig pen. Said, you know what? I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm going back to the way I'm supposed to be. I'm getting out and I'm going to get myself cleaned up and I'm going to go back. 2 Chronicles 7:14 said, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face. Now notice this next part. This is the part that stings. And turn from their wicked ways. Then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. You see, a lot of times when we find ourselves in the pig pen of life and we've put ourselves there, God is perfectly willing and able to forgive us and restore us to where we need to be. But God's not going to come live in the pig pen with us. We have got to make a conscious decision to get out of the pig pen. This young man could have stayed in that pig pen. He could have stayed there if he had wanted to, and he would have probably, not long after, probably would have died there. And it would have been the sad story of, the young man who had it all and wasted it all. That would have been the story in the Bible. But this young man did not do that. Yes, we can look at this as a negative thing, and we can say, oh, look what this man did. He had everything, and he went out and wasted it. But that's not the point, guys. This is a success story. This is a young man who hit rock bottom, who wasted everything he had, who thought he knew everything, hit rock bottom and found himself in the pig pen, and then one day said, you know what? God's not done with me yet. I'm going to get up and I'm going to clean myself off, and I'm going to go back to where I need to be. I'm going to go back to where I need to be. Lastly, we're going to look at his delivery. I always wonder, and it doesn't say much about it, but what this young man was thinking when he was on his way home. I can imagine what's going through his mind. You think about this. Now, you just told your dad, Dad, I know more than you do. I want my portion of what you have set aside for me, and I'm going to go off and I can do better than what you had planned for me. And it's not very long, all of a sudden, you have nothing left. You smell like whatever you can imagine living in a pig pen. You have nothing left of your name. You're dirty, you're filthy, and you're walking home on this road and just imagining what your dad's going to say to you. All of you remember those days when you're on your way home and you know your dad's found out about something you've done. You know he has. And you're just waiting as soon as you walk in the door. Boom, 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 boom. Here comes the lecture. And you're sitting there, oh my goodness, is he ever going to stop? I've been there. I've done that. I've gotten that lecture over and over and over and over. And taken the punishment and done all that. And I know that's what this young man was thinking about. Oh, man, Dad's going to say, son, I told you so. You know, he probably even somewhere in the back of his mind thought his dad might look at him and say, you're not my son anymore. Get out of here. You know that had to be a worry in the back of his mind. What did he say here? He said, I'm just going to go to my dad. And he didn't say, I'm going to ask him to be his son again. What did he say? I'm just going to ask him, can I just be like one of your servants? Can I just live here and work for you? So, you know, obviously he thought, my dad's not going to take me back. My dad's not going to have any more use for me. But we see when he gets there, first thing I want you to notice, his father was looking for him. His father was looking for him. It didn't say he had to go knock on the door and go look for his dad and his dad was out hunting. No, it said his father was sitting there watching the road, waiting on him to come home. I wonder how long his dad had been sitting there waiting. I bet from the moment he left, his dad had sat there and watched and waited for him to come back. I want you to understand this. If you've broken your fellowship with Jesus Christ this morning, if you've broken your fellowship with God, and maybe it's been a long time since you've talked to Him, He's sitting there and waiting on you to come back. He's sitting there on the road just watching for you. And it said the moment, I don't know how far away he was. I don't know if they had mountains, if it was flat. I have no idea. I don't know how far away he was. But they said as soon as his dad saw him, he didn't sit there in a rocker and wait on him to get there. It said his dad ran to him. Now, I bet all of a sudden this son's walking down the road and here comes his dad running thinking, oh, man, he really wants to get started on this lecture. He really wants to get started on this lecture. But then what happened? When his dad gets to him, I bet he just grabbed him and he tackled him and he started to kiss him. And the son thought, boy, this is not what I expected. Because let's face it, in the world today, a lot of times the picture of God is this guy who stands up there in heaven, waits on us to mess up, and then when we do, just clubs us right over the head with something to punish us. That's how the world pictures God. That's not God. This is the most perfect picture of what happens when we fall away from God. We think we know more than He does. We go out, we do our own thing, we end up in a pig pen. Then one day we decide, I don't want to be here anymore. And we turn and begin to head back to Him, and the whole time thinking, He ain't going to want to have anything to do with me. I've ruined it now. I've done so much now, He ain't going to want anything to do with me. He's going to kick me to the curb. He's going to finally say, that's the last time for you. You're done. But that's not our God. Understand that when we become a Christian and He adopts us into His family, guys, that's special. You become His child. Let me tell you, I look at my 3 children, and I can promise you, there's times they may do something that I'm not going to like, especially when they become teenagers. I promise you they'll probably do a lot I don't like. But do you think they could, and you guys that are here that are mothers and fathers today, is there anything that your child could ever do to where you would say, they're not my child anymore? I bet you cannot think of anything in your mind right now that they could ever do to where you'd say, I'm totally done with them. I don't want anything to do with them anymore. You may be aggravated with them. You may be mad at them. You may be frustrated with them. But there's nothing they could ever do to get to that point where you say, I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. And that's the exact same way that God is with us. The book of 1 John tells us if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. You may be in the pig pen this morning, but I can tell you this, God is not finished with you. He is not done with you. Now, we have to make a conscious decision to get ourselves up, clean ourselves off, and head back to Him. But let me tell you, He's not finished with you. I mean, you can imagine the stories in the Bible of people that have done the exact same thing. No better story than the Apostle Peter. He had walked with Jesus. He had seen every miracle that Jesus had done. He had sat there and Jesus had told him, "You're the rock I'm going to build my church on." And then all of a sudden, when it come time for Jesus to be crucified, what did Peter do? Denied him 3 times. Peter thought, "I know more." But let me tell you, when Peter brings himself back to Christ, he still used him. Peter wasn't broken. Peter had messed up. Raise your hand if you've been sitting in this room, you've never messed up. I believe every one of us have. The Bible tells us we have. It says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." That means every single one of us have done that. But let me tell you, if you're a child of God and you are finding yourself in the pig pen of life today, God wants you to get out. He wants you to clean yourself up, and He wants you to come home. Come home. He says, "You know what? I'm not going to make you like a servant. I'm not going to make you some second-rate citizen because you've messed up. Because you are still my child. You may have messed up. You may have squandered a lot of things. But I love you. I care about you. I want to bring you back into my fold." That's the message from the prodigal son. Everybody tends to focus on the young man messing up. But this is a success story. Because he got himself out of the pig pen. And he knew where home was. If you're in the pig pen this morning, and you've allowed yourself to get there, chances are you know where home is. It's time to go there. As they get their invitation song ready this morning, I want to share the lyrics to a song. I know that's probably something you don't normally do, but this is a song by the Crabb Family. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Crabb Family. A lot of you have. A song that they sing called "Please Forgive Me." The first verse is exactly this song. It says, "My sleep is gone, my heart is full of sorrow. I can't believe how much I've let you down." This is a man talking to God. He said, "You know what? I can't believe how much I've let you down. I dread the pain that waits for me tomorrow when the sun reveals my broken dreams scattered on the ground." Then he says, "Please forgive me. I need your grace to make it through. All I have is you. I'm at your mercy. Lord, I will serve you until my dying day and help others find the way at your mercy. Please forgive me." If you're here this morning and you found yourself at that point in your life where you're not where you need to be with God, there's 3 words that can get you right back to Him. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. You may be sitting here and you may say, "Jamie, I'm so far away, I don't even know how to get back." I believe Squire Parsons said, "When I could not go to where he was, he came to me." All we have to do is ask this morning. If you would stand to your feet as they sing. If you need to pray this morning, I'm going to ask that you come. Maybe for any reason whatsoever. But if you need to pray this morning, I ask that you come.